My name is Zara Sterling, and I am 32 years old. The air inside the Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church was thick with the scent of suffocating white lilies and expensive perfume. I sat in the very last pew of the sanctuary, trying to make myself as small as possible. The wooden bench was hard against my spine, but the discomfort was the only thing keeping me grounded in reality. Up at the front of the church, my mother, Camille Sterling, was putting on the performance of a lifetime. She stood by the open caskets of my grandparents, Langston and Ruby Sterling, and wailed with a theatrical grief that shook her diamond earrings. She dabbed at her perfectly dry eyes with a lace handkerchief and leaned heavily against my father Desmond as if she were too frail to stand. It was a lie. All of it was a lie. Camille did not love them. She had spent the last 20 years complaining that Langston was a stubborn old mule and Ruby was a judgmental witch who held the purse strings too tight. But today, in front of the pastor and the 300 members of the Atlanta elite, she was the grieving daughter-in-law. She was the picture of shattered devotion. I looked down at my own hands. They were rough and dry from years of scrubbing floors and washing dishes in a house that was not mine. I wore a simple black dress that I had bought at a thrift store 5 years ago. The fabric was fading and the hem was slightly frayed, but it was the only black thing I owned. My sister-in-law Bianca sat in the front row next to my brother Darius. She was checking her reflection in the back of a spoon she had pulled from her purse. She wore a custom black silk dress that probably cost more than my entire year of rent. She looked like she was attending a gala rather than a funeral. For 32 years, I had been the invisible member of the Sterling family. I was the mistake. I was the disappointment. I was the scapegoat. While Darius was praised for merely existing, my parents had made it clear that my presence was a debt I had to repay. They called it family duty, but as I got older, I realized it was a twisted version of a tax they levied on my existence. They claimed they had sacrificed everything to feed me and clothe me, so I owed them my labor. I owed them my silence. I owed them my life. I remembered the Christmas parties where I was 12 years old. While Darius sat by the tree opening expensive video game consoles, I was in the kitchen with an apron tied around my waist. Camille would snap her fingers and point to the trays of hors d'oeuvres. She would tell me to make sure the guests were happy. She would tell me to earn my keep, and I did. I served champagne to people who looked through me as if I were made of glass. I picked up their discarded napkins. I washed their crystal glasses until my fingers bled. I did it because I thought that if I worked hard enough and if I was quiet enough, they might finally love me. I was wrong. The service ended, and the procession moved slowly toward the heavy oak doors. I waited until everyone had left. I walked up to the front where the two caskets lay side by side. Grandpa Langston looked peaceful. Grandma Ruby looked stern even in death. I touched her cold hand. "You are safe now, Grandma," I whispered. I did not cry. I had no tears left. My grief was a heavy stone in my stomach that made it hard to breathe. They were the only two people in the world who had ever looked at me and actually seen me. They were the only ones who knew my name was Zara, and not just girl or you. Now they were gone, and I was alone in a tank full of sharks. "Get in the car, Zara, my father." Desmond barked from the doorway. His voice echoed in the empty church. "We are late for the appointment." I hurried after them, keeping my head down. I climbed into the back of the hired limousine and squeezed myself into the corner. Darius and Bianca sat across from me, sipping water from crystal bottles and complaining about the heat. I cannot believe how long that preacher talked. Bianca sighed and fanned herself with a program. "I have a facial scheduled for 3 o'clock. This better not take all day." "It will be quick," Darius said and patted her knee. "We just need to sign the papers. Dad says the old man left everything to the trust. We will be in and out in 20 minutes. My father Desmond sat in the front seat staring out the window with a look of hungry anticipation. He did not look like a man who had just buried his parents. He looked like a predator who had just cornered a wounded animal. He was mentally spending the inheritance already. I knew about the debts, I knew about the failing business, but I said nothing. I stayed in my corner. I stayed invisible. The offices of Augustus Vance were located on the top floor of a glass skyscraper in Buckhead. The waiting room smelled of old money and lemon polish. Mr. Vance came out to greet us himself. He was a tall man with skin the color of deep mahogany and silver hair that commanded respect. He had been my grandfather's attorney and best friend for 40 years. He looked at my father with a cold, professional detachment. "Mr. Sterling." "Mrs. Sterling, please come in," he said. We filed into his massive office. My family took the comfortable leather chairs arranged in a semicircle in front of the desk. My father sat in the center like a king holding court. Camille sat to his right, her pearls gleaming under the recessed lighting. Darius and Bianca took the seats on the left. There were no chairs left for me. I stood by the door, clutching my worn purse. "Sit down, Miss Sterling," Mr. Vance said gently. He pointed to a sturdy wooden chair he had pulled up to the corner of his desk. I sat down. The polyester of my cheap dress scratched against my legs. I felt the familiar rise of panic in my throat. I did not belong here. I belonged in the kitchen or the laundry room. I belonged in the background. "Let us proceed," Mr. Vance said. He put on his reading glasses and opened a thick leather folder. "We are here to execute the last will and testament of Langston and Ruby Sterling." My mother let out a dramatic sob. "They were such generous souls," she wailed. "They loved us so much." "Cut the act, Camille," my father snapped. "Let's get to the point, Augustus. We all know the estate goes to the family trust. Just read the numbers so we can get to lunch. I have investors waiting." Mr. Vance looked at my father over the rim of his glasses. "Actually, David, the terms are quite specific." "Specific?" Darius laughed. He leaned back and put his arm around Bianca. "Specific means money, baby. I'm going to need that capital injection for the new business venture." I knew his new business venture was a high-stakes poker table at the MGM Grand, but I kept my mouth shut. My hands were shaking in my lap. Mr. Vance ignored him. He began to read from the document. "After all debts are settled and all minor bequests are distributed, the entirety of the estate, including the Buckhead property, the art collection, the stock portfolio, and the liquid assets is valued at approximately $45 million. $45 million. The number hung in the air. It was larger than anyone had expected. My father's eyes widened. A greedy smile spread across his face. He tapped his gold watch against the arm of the chair. "Excellent," he said. "Better than I thought." The old man held out on me. "Transfer it to the main account, Augustus. I will take over management immediately." Mr. Vance did not move. He turned the page. "I am afraid you misunderstand, Desmond," he said. His voice was calm, but it had an edge of steel. "The entirety of this estate is left to a single beneficiary." My father froze. "What are you talking about? I am the only son. I am the beneficiary." Mr. Vance looked up. He looked past my father. He looked past my mother. He looked past Darius and Bianca. His eyes landed on me. "To the only person we trust to honor our history," Mr. Vance read aloud, "to the only person who understands the value of integrity. We leave 100% of our estate to our granddaughter, Zara Sterling." Silence. It was a heavy, violent silence that sucked the air out of the room. Clack. Bianca's expensive alligator clutch slipped from her lap and hit the hardwood floor. The sound was like a gunshot. I sat frozen in my wooden chair. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I did not feel joy. I did not feel relief. I felt a cold, terrifying wave of pure fear. I looked at my brother Darius. His smug, reddish face had turned a sickly, pale purple. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. $45 million, he choked out. "Impossible." My mother Camille shrieked. The mask of the grieving matriarch shattered into 1,000 sharp pieces. The fake tears vanished instantly. Her face twisted into a look of pure, uncut venom. "There has been a mistake, Howard," she screamed. "You read it wrong. That is impossible." "Zara." She whipped her head around to look at me. Her eyes narrowed with the disgust I had known my entire life. It was the look she gave a stain on the carpet. It was the look she gave a cockroach in the kitchen. "Zara," she spat. "The girl cannot even pay her own phone bill. She is useless. She is a child. What does she know about money?" Silence. "Camille," my father roared. He slammed his hand down on the mahogany desk. The water pitcher rattled. His entire body shook with a rage that I knew too well. He stood up and towered over the desk. He was a large man, and in that moment he looked like a monster. "Augustus, what is this nonsense?" he shouted. The old man was senile. He was not in his right mind. "I am contesting this will. This is fraud, I assure you," Mr. Vance said, and his voice dropped to a temperature that could freeze water. Mr. Sterling was perfectly lucid when he signed this. "We have video evidence, we have medical certifications, and we have witnesses." My father's head snapped toward me. His eyes were small and dangerous. They pinned me to the chair. I shrank back, trying to disappear into the wood. "Zara," he growled. It was a low animal sound. "What did you do?" he whispered. "What lies did you feed them, you ungrateful little wretch? You manipulated them." "I did not do anything," I whispered. My voice was barely audible. "You stole my inheritance," my mother hissed. "After everything we did for you, we fed you, we clothed you, we put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay us. You steal $45 million from your own family." "I am not stealing it," I said. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "It is what they wanted." "You shut your mouth!" Darius shouted. He jumped up from his chair. "You are just a girl. You are a nobody. That money belongs to the business. It belongs to the legacy." "Legacy." Bianca laughed. It was a high, cruel sound. She looked at me with pure contempt. "Look at her. She is wearing a dress from the trash can. You think she knows what to do with $45 million? She will probably give it all to some charity for stray cats. This is a joke." My father walked toward me. His heavy footsteps thudded on the carpet. I pressed myself back against the chair. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. I was 12 years old again, and I had just broken a crystal glass. I was waiting for the backhand slap. I was waiting for the punishment. He stopped inches from my face. I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the sour scent of his sweat. "Sign it over," he said. His voice was dangerously quiet. He pointed a thick finger at my face. "You will sign the papers to transfer every single dime into the family trust right now. I will manage it as it was meant to be managed. You will do as you are told, Zara. Or so help me God, I will make you wish you had never been born." I looked at that finger. I looked at his furious face. I looked at my mother's hateful sneer and my brother's greedy panic. I felt the terror rising in my throat, choking me. This was not a gift. This was a target painted on my back. $45 million had not made me powerful. It had made me prey. The ride back to my parents' house was a masterclass in suffocating tension. My father Desmond drove his black Mercedes with a white-knuckled grip on the leather steering wheel. He drove too fast. He wove in and out of traffic with aggressive jerks that made my stomach turn. No one spoke. The silence in the car was heavy and toxic. It was the kind of silence that precedes a natural disaster. My mother Camille stared out the passenger window. Her jaw was set so tight I could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. In the back seat beside me, Darius and Bianca were texting furiously. They were probably canceling reservations. They were probably calculating exactly how much debt they were suddenly drowning in. We pulled into the driveway of the house I had lived in for most of my life. It was a large brick colonial house in a respectable neighborhood, but it had never felt like a home. It was a stage set where the Sterling family performed their play of perfection for the neighbors. Today the curtain was down. "Get inside," Desmond ordered. He did not wait for me. He marched toward the front door with the heavy, determined steps of an executioner. I followed him. My legs felt like lead. I knew what was coming. I had known this moment would arrive from the second Mr. Vance read the will. We gathered in the living room. This was the room where we took Christmas photos. This was the room where my mother hosted her prayer circles. Now it felt like a courtroom. My father walked to the antique sideboard and poured himself a glass of whiskey. His hand was shaking. He downed it in one gulp and slammed the glass onto the wood. He turned to face me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was a power of attorney form. He had been carrying it with him. He had been so sure. He smoothed it out on the coffee table. "Sign it," he said. His voice was low and calm, which terrified me more than his shouting. "Sign it, Zara." We will transfer the assets into the trust tonight. I will give you a stipend. We will make sure you have enough for rent and groceries. You will be taken care of. But you are not keeping that money." I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen he had placed beside it. It was a Mont Blanc pen. Heavy. Expensive. My mother Camille stepped forward. She put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch made my skin crawl. "Baby, listen to your father," she cooed. Her voice was dripping with a sick sweetness. "You are overwhelmed. We understand. $45 million is a burden. It is too much for a young woman. You do not know how to handle tax shelters. You do not know how to manage stocks. You will lose it all in a year. Let Daddy handle it. He knows best." I looked at Darius. He was leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. He was smirking. "Just sign the paper, Zara," he said. "Don't be stupid. You know you are not smart enough for this. Remember when you tried to apply to business school? Dad told you then that you didn't have the head for numbers. Stick to your little art projects. Let the men handle the business. The men. The men who gambled away inheritances. The men who forged signatures." I looked at the three of them. They were a wall of expectation. They were a fortress of manipulation. For 32 years I had done exactly what they asked. I had cleaned. I had cooked. I had stayed silent. I had made myself small so they could feel big. But Grandma Ruby had left me a sword. I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt thin. "No," I whispered. My father blinked. He looked like he had misheard me. "Excuse me," he said. I said no. I repeated. My voice was louder this time. It was shaky, but it was clear. "I am not signing it. Grandpa Langston left it to me. Grandma Ruby left it to me. It is mine." The explosion was instantaneous. Desmond's face turned a dark, violent shade of plum. The veins in his neck bulged against his collar. He did not scream. He roared. It was a sound of pure primal rage. "You ungrateful little bitch," he shouted. He lunged across the room. I flinched, expecting a hit, but he stormed past me. He ran up the stairs. I heard him stomping down the hallway to my bedroom. I heard the sound of drawers being ripped open. I heard the crash of objects hitting the floor. "David, wait!" Camille cried, but she did not move to stop him. She just watched me with cold, hateful eyes. "Look what you made him do. This is your fault, Zara. You broke his heart." I stood there trembling. Above me, the sounds of destruction continued. It sounded like a storm was tearing apart the small attic room I had occupied since childhood. 2 minutes later, Desmond appeared at the top of the stairs. He was carrying 2 large black heavy-duty trash bags. He dragged them down the stairs. They bumped loudly against every step. Thud, thud, thud. He reached the bottom and threw them at my feet. "Get out!" he screamed. The bags had split open. My clothes spilled out onto the polished hardwood floor. My sweaters, my jeans, my sketchbooks. My entire life had been ripped from hangers and stuffed into garbage bags like refuse. "You want to be independent?" Desmond spat. "You want to be the big shot with the money. Fine, go be independent. Get out of my house." He grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my flesh like iron claws. He dragged me toward the front door. I stumbled, tripping over my own feet. "Dad, please," I cried. "It is dark. I have nowhere to go." "I don't care," he yelled. "Go buy a hotel. You are rich now, right? Get out." He shoved me through the front door. I fell hard onto the concrete porch. My palms scraped against the rough stone. Pain shot up my arms. He kicked the trash bags out after me. One of them hit my shoulder. I scrambled to my knees. I reached into my purse for my phone. I needed to call a taxi. I needed to call Mr. Vance. Desmond saw the phone in my hand. "Oh, no, you don't," he growled. He snatched the phone from my grip. He threw it onto the driveway. The glass shattered. He did not stop there. He lifted his heavy dress shoe and stomped on it. Crunch. He stomped again. Crunch. He ground his heel into the device until it was nothing but a pile of plastic and glass shards. "No family plan for traitors," he said, breathing hard. He loomed over me. I was on the ground looking up at him. He raised his hand. It was a massive, heavy hand. The hand that had disciplined me. The hand that had controlled me. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut, waiting for the strike. He shoved me again instead. The force of it sent me sprawling backward onto the cold grass. As my head hit the turf, the world spun. The shock of the impact jarred something loose in my memory. The smell of the wet grass vanished. The sight of my father's angry face dissolved. Suddenly, I was 10 years old. I was sitting at the kitchen table. The afternoon sun was streaming through the window. I was so happy. My chest was swelling with pride. I had placed a piece of paper on the table in front of my father. It was a math test. At the top, in bright red ink, was the letter A and the word perfect. I beat everyone, Daddy, I said, beaming. I even got the bonus question right. My father looked at the paper. Then he looked at Darius, who was sitting across from me. Darius was 12. He was sulking. His own test lay on the table. It had a C- on it. Darius was crying. Desmond looked at me. His eyes were cold. He did not smile. He picked up my test. "You are making your brother feel bad," he said. He took the paper with the perfect score. He ripped it in half. The sound of the tearing paper was loud in the quiet kitchen. "Rip!" He put the two halves together and ripped them again. "Rip!" "Girls do not need to be smart, Zara," he said, dropping the confetti of my hard work onto my plate. "Girls need to be nice. You are not being nice. You are embarrassing the future head of this family. Apologize to your brother." I remembered the confusion. I remembered the hot tears. I remembered apologizing to Darius for being smarter than him. I remembered learning the lesson. My success was a mistake. My light was offensive. The memory faded. The cold reality of the night rushed back. I was 32 years old. I was lying on the lawn. My shoulder throbbed. Flash! A bright light blinded me. I looked up. Bianca was standing on the porch behind my father. She was holding her phone up. The flashlight was on. She was recording. "Oh my God, look at her!" She laughed. Her voice was high and cruel. "The heiress is sleeping on the lawn. This is precious. Say hi to the internet, Zara. Everyone is going to see this." Darius stepped out next to her. He looked down at me with a sneer. "You should have just signed the paper, Zara," he said. "You brought this on yourself. You always have to be difficult." My mother appeared in the doorway. She held a glass of white wine in her hand. She looked at me shivering on the grass surrounded by my garbage bags. She took a sip of wine. "You made your choice," she said simply. She reached out and pulled my father back inside. "Come on, David," she said. "The neighbors are watching. She is not worth the noise." Desmond looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes. There was no regret. There was only the cold indifference of a man looking at a piece of trash he had finally discarded. "You are dead to us," he said. "Do not come back." He stepped inside. Bam! The heavy front door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the quiet neighborhood like a thunderclap. I heard the distinct click of the deadbolt sliding into place. Then I heard the secondary click of the security chain. The porch light flickered off. I was alone. I sat on the damp grass. My knees were stained with dirt. My hands were bleeding. My phone was a pile of dust. My clothes were scattered around me like debris from a shipwreck. The night air was biting cold, and it cut through the thin fabric of my cheap funeral dress. I wrapped my arms around myself and rocked back and forth. A sob tore its way out of my throat. It was a raw, ugly sound. I had $45 million to my name, but I had never been poorer. I had never been more vulnerable. The house that I had cleaned for decades stood before me silent and impenetrable. I looked at the black trash bag near my foot. A corner of a book was poking out. It was my art history textbook. The cover was bent. They had thrown me away. But as I sat there in the dark, watching the shadows of the trees lengthen across the lawn, a strange clarity began to rise through the pain. The fear was still there, yes, but something else was waking up. It was the part of me that had refused to sign. It was the part of me that Grandma Ruby had seen. I wiped my face with the back of my dirty hand. I reached out and pulled the trash bag closer to me. It was all I had. "I am not trash," I whispered to the darkness. I looked at the dark windows of the house. I am the owner of this story now. But first, I had to survive the night. I stood up. My legs were shaking violently. I gathered my 2 bursting trash bags. I could not carry them both and my purse. I had to drag them. The plastic scraped against the pavement as I began the long walk toward the main road. I walked away from the house. I walked away from the lie. I walked into the cold, terrifying dark of my new life. I dragged the 2 heavy black trash bags down the uneven pavement of the suburban street. The plastic stretched and groaned against the asphalt. Every few steps, the thin material would snag on a stray twig or a crack in the sidewalk, threatening to spill my humiliated life out onto the road for the second time that night. My shoulder throbbed where the first bag had hit me. My knees burned from the impact of the fall, but the physical pain was distant. It was a dull background noise compared to the screaming siren of panic in my mind. I had no phone. I had no car. I had no coat. I walked for 4 blocks until I saw the pale yellow glow of a gas station sign. It was a relic from another era. A payphone stood on the corner, its metal casing covered in graffiti and grime. I dropped my bags at my feet and dug into my purse. My fingers shook so violently that I dropped a quarter twice before I managed to jam it into the slot. I closed my eyes and prayed that I remembered the number correctly. I had seen it on Mr. Vance's business card just hours ago, but in my panic, my mind felt like a sieve. I dialed. The phone rang once. It rang twice. Jameson and Vance Legal Services. The voice was crisp and automated. It was an answering service. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was nearly 9 o'clock at night. Of course he was not in the office. I felt a sob rising in my throat. I was going to have to leave a message. I was going to be stranded here. If this is an emergency, please press 1. I pressed the button so hard my finger hurt. There was a click, and then a real human voice. This is the emergency line for Augustus Vance. Who is calling? It is Zara, I whispered. My voice cracked. It is Zara Sterling. There was a brief pause. Then the tone of the voice changed completely. It was no longer a receptionist. It was him. Ms. Sterling. Mr. Vance's deep baritone was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Where are you? He asked. I am at the gas station on the corner of Elmwood and 4th, I said. I am alone. My father, he threw me out. He broke my phone. I know exactly where that is, Mr. Vance said. His voice was calm and steady like a lighthouse in a hurricane. Do not move. Do not speak to anyone. I am leaving my residence now. I will be there in 12 minutes. Stay in the light, Zara. The line went dead. I hung up the greasy receiver. 12 minutes. I stood under the flickering fluorescent light of the gas station canopy. I wrapped my arms around my chest, trying to stop the shivering. Cars drove past. A pickup truck slowed down and the driver leered at me. I stared at the ground, refusing to make eye contact. I felt exposed. I felt like prey. I was a woman with $45 million to her name, standing next to garbage bags of clothes, waiting for a savior. Exactly 11 minutes later, a pair of headlights cut through the darkness. They were not the yellow dim lights of the pickup trucks or the sedans that had passed me. These were bright blue-white xenon beams that sliced the night open. A long, sleek car pulled up to the curb. It was a Bentley Mulsanne. It was black and silent, and it looked like a shark gliding through deep water. The back door opened. Augustus Vance stepped out. He was not wearing his suit jacket anymore, just a white dress shirt and a dark vest. He looked at me. He looked at my bleeding hands. He looked at the trash bags. His jaw tightened. A flash of pure cold anger crossed his face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Get in, Ms. Sterling, he said. He did not ask the driver to help. He walked over and picked up the dirty trash bags himself. He lifted them with a dignity that made them seem like Louis Vuitton luggage. He placed them in the trunk. I opened the back door and slid inside. The interior of the Bentley was a different world. The outside world was cold and hard and smelled of gasoline and exhaust. Inside it was warm. The air was filtered and smelled of rich leather and cedar wood. The seats were soft cream-colored hide that felt like butter against my skin. I shrank back into the corner. I looked down at my dress. It was stained with grass and dirt. My shoes were scuffed. I felt dirty. I felt like a contamination in this pristine space. This was the imposter syndrome crashing down on me. I did not belong here. I was the girl who scrubbed the floors. I was the girl who ate in the kitchen. I was not the girl who rode in the back of a $300,000 car. I pulled my arms in tight, trying not to touch anything, trying not to stain the perfection around me. Mr. Vance slid into the seat next to me. He pressed a button, and a glass partition slid up, separating us from the driver. The car began to move. It glided over the potholes that had tripped me just minutes before. "Drink this," he said. He opened a small refrigerated compartment and handed me a bottle of sparkling water. I took it, but my hands were shaking too hard to open the cap. He gently took it back, twisted the cap off, and handed it to me again. "Your grandparents knew this would happen," he said softly. I took a sip of the cold water. It hurt my throat. "They knew my father would throw me out," I asked. "They knew Desmond was a desperate man," Mr. Vance corrected. "They knew he was drowning in debt. And they knew that a desperate man does not act with logic or love. He acts with greed." He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a handkerchief. He handed it to me. "Wipe your hands, Zara. You are safe now." I looked at the white linen. I was afraid to ruin it. But I took it. I wiped the blood and the dirt from my palms. "Where are we going?" I whispered. "A hotel." "No," Mr. Vance said. "We are not going to a hotel. We are going home." The car turned. We were leaving the run-down streets of the suburbs and heading north. We were heading toward Buckhead. The trees became taller. The fences became higher. The houses disappeared behind massive iron gates and long, winding driveways. This was the land of old money. This was the land of the Sterlings. My stomach twisted. "We cannot go to the house," I said. "My father will come there. He thinks he controls the estate. He will have the keys. He will call the police and say I am trespassing." Mr. Vance turned to look at me. The passing streetlights illuminated his face. He looked like a general going into battle. "Let him come," he said. The car slowed down. We were not at the main gate of my grandparents' estate. We were at the service entrance on the north side. It was a gate I knew well. It was the gate the caterers used. It was the gate I had used 1,000 times to sneak in and out so I would not disturb the guests. The gate swung open automatically. The Bentley drove up the winding path and stopped at the side door. Mr. Vance led me inside. The moment the door clicked shut behind us, the silence of the house wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. It was not the hostile silence of my parents' house. This silence had a texture. It smelled of beeswax furniture polish and old paper and the faint lingering scent of Grandma Ruby's rosewater perfume. Mr. Vance walked to the library. I followed him. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor. He walked to the massive desk where my grandfather used to sit. He opened his briefcase again. He pulled out a thick document bound in a blue legal folder. He placed it on the desk. "This," he said, "is a warranty deed." I looked at it. 6 months ago, when your grandfather first got sick. "He called me," Mr. Vance explained. "He told me that he did not trust Desmond to wait for the will. He was afraid your father would try to manipulate the probate process. So he did something very rare and very decisive." He tapped the document. "Langston and Ruby Sterling transferred the ownership of this house and everything in it to you 6 months ago. It is not part of the inheritance. It is not part of the trust. It is already yours. It has been recorded with the state." I reached out and touched the paper. My name was there. Zara Sterling, owner. "It means, Mr. Vance," said, his voice low and intense, "that this is your fortress. Your father can scream, he can threaten, but legally he has no more right to be here than a stranger off the street." I picked up the document. Tears pricked my eyes. They had protected me. Even when I thought I was alone, they had been building a wall around me. Mr. Vance looked at his watch. "I have security stationed at the perimeter," he said. "No one gets in without your permission. I suggest you rest Zara. Tomorrow will be a war." I nodded, but I could not rest. Not yet. I left the library and walked down the long hallway. The house was massive. It had 12 bedrooms and a ballroom, but I did not go to the bedrooms. My feet carried me toward the east wing. The east wing had always been kept locked when I was a child. My cousins used to say it was haunted. My parents said it was just storage for old junk. But tonight the door was unlocked. I pushed it open. I expected darkness. Instead, I found light. The room was climate-controlled. Soft, museum-quality track lighting hummed overhead. It was not a storage room. It was a gallery. I gasped. The walls were lined with paintings, but they were not the stuffy European landscapes that most wealthy families in Buckhead collected. These were vibrant, raw, and powerful. I walked to the nearest canvas. It was a Jacob Lawrence original. The jagged shapes and bold colors depicted the Great Migration. I moved to the next one. It was a rare sketch by Augusta Savage. Further down was a large, haunting photograph by Gordon Parks, showing a black family standing with dignity in the face of segregation. I realized with a jolt what this was. This was not just art. This was the missing history of our people. Grandpa Langston had spent 40 years collecting pieces that the mainstream art world had ignored or discarded. He had saved them. He had built a sanctuary for black brilliance right here in the heart of the South. I walked to the center of the room. On a pedestal under a glass case was a small battered Bible. I recognized it. It was the Bible carried by my great-great-grandfather when he walked out of slavery. My knees went weak. I thought about my father's conversation with Darius in the car. I thought about their plans for the estate, liquid assets, capital injection. They did not know this room existed. Or maybe they did, and they just saw dollar signs. If my father got his hands on this house, he would not see a legacy. He would see inventory. He would sell the Jacob Lawrence to a private bidder in Switzerland. He would sell the Gordon Parks to a hedge fund manager in New York. He would sell the Bible to a pawn shop if it meant he could keep his country club membership for another year. He would dismantle 70 years of preservation to pay for his gambling and his fraud. I reached out and placed my hand on the glass case protecting the Bible. The glass was cool, but I felt a heat radiating from it. It was the heat of responsibility. For the first time, the $45 million made sense. It was not a reward. It was a budget. It was the operating cost for this mission. I looked around the room at the faces in the paintings. They were looking back at me. They were tired. They were strong. They were waiting. I am not just fighting for myself, I whispered to the empty room. The imposter syndrome that had choked me in the Bentley began to fade. It was replaced by a heavy, grounding sensation. I was not an imposter. I was a guardian. My parents had tried to erase me, just like the world had tried to erase these artists. We were the same. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the smell of old canvas and preservation oil. My shoulders still throbbed from where my father had shoved me, but the pain felt different now. It was no longer the pain of a victim. It was the pain of a soldier who had taken the first hit in a long battle. I left the gallery and locked the door behind me. I put the key in my pocket. It felt heavy and warm against my hip. I walked back to the library where Mr. Vance was making a phone call. I stood in the doorway. I was still wearing my dirty dress. My hair was still messy, but I stood straighter. Mr. Vance looked up. He ended the call. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. "I found what I need to protect," I said. He nodded slowly. A small smile touched his lips. "Then let us prepare for the siege," he said. I walked to the window and looked out at the long, dark driveway. Somewhere out there my father was plotting. He was angry. He was desperate. He thought he was coming tomorrow to crush a scared little girl. He was wrong. He was coming to meet the curator of his destruction. I sat on the floor of the library, surrounded by the contents of the black trash bags. Mr. Vance had left me alone to process the night, and the silence of the house felt both heavy and protective. I reached for the stack of art history books that had been unceremoniously dumped onto the floor. These books were my only escape during the long years of serving my family. I picked up a heavy volume on the Harlem Renaissance. As I lifted it, a small, leather-bound notebook slid out from between the pages and landed on the Persian rug with a soft thud. It was not mine. I picked it up. The leather was worn and soft, the color of dried blood. The cover was embossed with a simple gold cross. It was Grandma Ruby's prayer journal. I had seen her writing in this every morning at the kitchen table while I cooked breakfast for the family. She would close it quickly whenever I walked by, offering me a small, tight smile that I had always interpreted as dismissal. I thought she was hiding her prayers from me because I was not worthy of them. My hands trembled as I opened the first page. The entry was dated 3 years ago. The handwriting was strong and elegant, a testament to the proud schoolteacher she had once been. "Lord, please forgive my son Desmond." He looked at his father today, not with love, but with calculation. He asked about the will again. He asked about the stocks. I see the hunger in his eyes, Lord, and it terrifies me. He is a wolf waiting for the winter to take the weak deer. Please, Lord, soften his heart. I turned the pages. The entries became more frequent and more desperate. The handwriting began to change. As her health failed, the elegant loops became shaky and jagged. The ink was often smudged as if she had been crying while she wrote. October 14th. Darius came to the house today. He smells of cheap cologne and desperation. He lied to Langston about the business. I saw him take cash from the petty cash jar when he thought I was sleeping. My grandson is a thief, Lord. He has no honor. He has no spine. He is a hollow man filled only with appetite. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. They knew. All those years I thought my grandparents were oblivious to the theft and the disrespect. I thought they were just frail old people who believed my father's lies. But they had seen everything. They had been watching their legacy rot from the inside out. I turned to the final section. The entries were dated just 2 months before the car crash that took them. The writing was barely legible, a scrawl of pain and urgency. I watched Zara today. She was on her hands and knees scrubbing the grout in the foyer. Desmond walked right over her freshly mopped floor with his muddy shoes. He did not even apologize. He did not even see her. She just wiped the mud away and kept working. She does not say a word. She holds her tongue. My breath hitched. I read on. Lord, I worry that she thinks she is weak. I worry that she thinks her silence is cowardice. She does not know that I am watching. She does not know that Langston and I are testing her. We need a guardian, Lord. We need someone who knows how to endure. Desmond is loud, but he is brittle. He will break under pressure. Darius is flashy, but he is empty. But Zara, my sweet, quiet Zara, she is iron-wrapped in velvet. Tears blurred my vision, hot, heavy tears that burned my cheeks. I wiped them away furiously, needing to read the rest. I am leaving her the sword, Lord. I am leaving her the truth. It will be a heavy burden. She will think we have abandoned her when the wolves come, but she must know that the fire is necessary. The fire purifies the gold. When the time comes, Lord, give her the strength to stop scrubbing the floor and start burning the house of lies down. Give her the strength to roar. I closed the book. I pressed it against my chest. A sob tore out of my throat so violent it shook my entire body. For 32 years I had believed I was the mistake. I thought my silence was my shame. I thought my inability to fight back against my father's bullying was a character flaw. But Grandma Ruby had reframed my entire existence in a few trembling pages. My endurance was not weakness. It was training. I was not the scapegoat. I was the strategy. I sat there for a long time, letting the words sink into my marrow. The feeling of unworthiness that had plagued me in the Bentley began to dissolve. It was replaced by a righteous fury. They had hurt me, yes, but worse than that, they had broken the heart of this woman. They had made her last years on earth a time of fear and vigilance. They had forced her to document her own son's corruption instead of enjoying her final days. I stood up. I placed the prayer journal on the desk next to the deed. I am ready, Grandma, I whispered to the quiet room. Show me the sword. I remembered the letter Mr. Vance had mentioned. He said Grandpa Langston was logical. He said the evidence would be where I expected it. I walked to the massive built-in bookshelves that lined the west wall of the library. I ran my fingers along the spines of the books. I knew this collection by heart. I had dusted these books every week for a decade. My hand stopped on a copy of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. It was poetic. My father had treated me as invisible my whole life. My grandfather knew that. I pulled the book from the shelf. It was not a real book. It was a hollow metal box disguised with a leather spine. Behind it, set into the wood of the shelf, was a small digital safe. I knew the combination instantly. It was not a birthday. It was not an anniversary. It was the date I was accepted into Spelman College, the date my father had torn up my acceptance letter and told me I was too stupid for higher education, the date my grandparents had secretly wired the tuition money to the registrar under an anonymous donor name. August 14th, 2012. I punched in the numbers 08142012. The safe beeped. A small green light flashed in the darkness. The heavy steel door clicked open. There was no cash inside. There were no diamonds. There was only a black accountant's ledger and a small silver USB drive. I carried them to the desk and sat down in my grandfather's massive leather chair. It was too big for me, but as I sat there, I felt a strange sense of belonging. I opened the ledger. It was a forensic accounting of a crime family. My grandfather had tracked every single penny. The first section was labeled Darius. I ran my finger down the columns. January 10th, $50,000. Wire transfer to MGM Grand Las Vegas. Reason given to family investment in tech startup. Reality payment for poker markers. March 3rd, $20,000. Cash withdrawal. Reason given, car repairs. Reality payment to offshore sports betting website. I flipped the pages. The numbers grew larger. 70,000, 100,000. In total, my brother Darius had siphoned over $500,000 from the estate in the last 2 years alone. $500,000. A memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was 17 years old. It was the summer before my senior year. I had started a small business making organic candles in the kitchen. I called it Zara's Scents. I had worked all summer selling them at local markets. I had saved $900. It was the first money I had ever earned that was truly mine. I kept it in a small metal cash box under my bed. I was going to use it to buy a laptop for college. One afternoon, I came home and found the box pried open. The money was gone. I ran downstairs crying. I found Darius in the living room. He was wearing a brand new pair of limited edition sneakers and holding a new video game. "Darius took my money," I screamed. My father looked up from his newspaper. Darius looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. "I did not touch her little box." Darius lied smoothly. "She probably lost it." "She is so careless, Dad. She leaves things lying around." Desmond stood up. He did not ask Darius for proof. He turned to me. "Stop lying, Zara," he shouted. "You lost the money, and now you are trying to blame your brother. You are irresponsible. This is why you cannot be trusted with business." He grounded me for a month for lying. I had to watch Darius walk around in those sneakers, knowing they were bought with my sweat. The injustice of it had burned a hole in my stomach for years. Now looking at the ledger, the anger returned. It was not the helpless anger of a teenager. It was the cold, calculating anger of an auditor. Darius had stolen $900 from me, and my father had protected him. Now I saw that Darius had stolen $500,000 from them, and they had documented every cent. "He is not a businessman," I said aloud, my voice hard. "He is a junkie." I turned the page to the section labeled Desmond. This was worse. This was not just theft. This was felony fraud. There were copies of bank documents from SunTrust Bank, a loan agreement for $2 million. The collateral listed was the Sterling private stock portfolio. At the bottom of the page was the signature Langston Sterling. But it was not my grandfather's signature. The loop on the L was too wide. The slant was wrong. It was a forgery. A clumsy, desperate forgery. My father had forged his own father's signature to secure a $2 million loan for his failing consulting firm. I looked at the date on the loan. It was due in full in 9 days. Suddenly, everything made sense. The rush to read the will, the panic in the lawyer's office, the violent rage when I refused to sign the power of attorney. Desmond did not just want the $45 million for a new car or a vacation. He needed it to stay out of federal prison. He was going to use my inheritance to pay back the loan before the bank realized the signature was fake. He was going to wash his crime away with my money. He was not just a bully. He was a criminal. I looked at the USB drive. I knew what was on it. Mr. Vance had told me it was an audio recording. I did not need to listen to it yet to know what it contained. It would be the final nail in the coffin. I closed the ledger. The heavy thud of the cover sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. For years, I had been afraid of my father. I had been afraid of his voice. I had been afraid of his hand. I had been afraid of his disappointment. But looking at these numbers, the fear evaporated. You cannot be afraid of a man who is this pathetic. You cannot be afraid of a man who has to steal from his dying parents to pretend he is successful. He was not a giant. He was a fraud. I stood up. I walked to the window. The sun was beginning to rise over the expansive lawn of the estate. The sky was turning a pale, bruised purple. In a few hours they would be here. They would come with their locksmiths and their police and their righteous indignation. They would come to crush the scapegoat. I touched the cold glass of the window. "Come on then, Desmond," I whispered. I turned back to the desk where the evidence of their sins lay waiting. "Come and get your judgment." The morning sun filtered through the heavy velvet curtains of the guest suite in the east wing. I woke up in a bed that was softer than clouds, wrapped in sheets of Egyptian cotton that smelled of lavender. For the first few seconds of consciousness, I forgot who I was. I forgot about the trash bags. I forgot about the $45 million. I just felt safe. Then the phone on the nightstand began to vibrate. It was a sleek new device that Mr. Vance had provided for me the night before. He had given the number to no one. He said it was for my security. Yet as I reached for it, the screen was lighting up with a relentless staccato rhythm. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I picked it up. There were 42 new notifications. I unlocked the screen and my stomach dropped. The messages were not from strangers. They were from my cousins. They were from the deacons at the church. They were from the women in my mother's prayer circle. "How could you do this to your mother? Ungrateful wretch. Repent, Zara. The Lord does not like ugly." I opened the social media app that Mr. Vance had installed. My feed was flooded. At the very top was a post from Camille Sterling. It had been posted at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a photo of her and my father holding hands, looking devastated. Her eyes were red. The caption was a masterclass in weaponized victimhood. "Please pray for the Sterling family. Our hearts are shattered. Our beloved daughter Zara has suffered a mental break. In her confusion and greed, she has taken advantage of our late parents' dementia to lock us out of our family home. We are worried for her soul. We are worried for her safety. We only want to help her. Please pray that she opens her heart and returns the stolen property to the family trust. Broken-hearted, Shah's prodigal daughter. Pray for Zara." I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a smear campaign. It was a calculated nuclear strike on my character. Before I had even taken my first sip of coffee, my mother had turned the entire community against me. She knew exactly what buttons to punch. She used the language of the church and the language of family loyalty to paint me as a predator. She had turned the victim into the villain. I scrolled through the comments. There were hundreds of them. People I had served coffee to at Christmas parties were calling me a thief. People whose children I had babysitted for free were calling me mentally unstable. I felt a familiar urge to hide. The old Zara wanted to crawl under the covers. The old Zara wanted to call her mother and apologize just to make the noise stop. The weight of the black tax pressed down on me. The cultural pressure to protect the family name at all costs was suffocating. In our community, we do not air dirty laundry. We do not sue our parents. We take the abuse and we smile because survival depends on unity. My mother was banking on that guilt. She was counting on my shame to break me before the sun even came up. My thumb hovered over the delete account button. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to go back to being invisible. Being invisible was painful, but it was safe. Being seen like this as a monster was unbearable. Then I looked at the nightstand. Next to the vibrating phone lay the leather-bound prayer journal. I picked it up. I opened it to the last page where the ink was smudged with Grandma Ruby's tears. Ruth Thengum Ra Kongai. Pull out the sword, daughter. The words echoed of the quiet room. Grandma Ruby had known this would happen. She had predicted the wolves would come. She had not told me to hide. She had told me to burn the house of lies down. I put the phone down. I did not delete the account. I did not reply to the messages. I let them buzz. I let them hate me. Their hate was based on a lie, and I held the truth in a black ledger downstairs. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at my reflection. My eyes were puffy, but my jaw was set. "Let them talk," I whispered to the empty room. "They are not praying for me. They are preying on me, and I am done being the food." I went to the bathroom and washed my face. I did not put on the dirty dress from the trash bag. Instead, I went to the closet where Mr. Vance's assistant had arranged a selection of clothes from my grandmother's collection. I chose a silk robe in a deep royal blue. It flowed around me like water. I brushed my hair back. I put on my grandmother's pearl earrings. I was not the help. I was the chatelaine. I walked downstairs to the kitchen. Mr. Vance was already there, sitting at the island with a cup of coffee and a tablet. He looked up as I entered. He saw the phone in my hand. He saw the set of my jaw. "You saw the post," he said simply. "I did," I replied. I poured myself a cup of coffee. My hand was steady. "Do you want me to issue a cease and desist for defamation?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. I took a sip of the dark roast. Let her dig the hole deeper. When the truth comes out, her lies will be the dirt that buries her reputation, not mine. Mr. Vance smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "Good," he said, "because your guests have arrived." He turned the tablet toward me. It was connected to the security cameras at the front gate. It was exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. On the screen, I saw a procession of desperation. My father's black Mercedes was leading the way. Behind it was a white van with the words A1 Locksmith painted on the side. And behind that was Darius's flashy red sports car. They stopped at the massive iron gates. The gates were closed and locked. I watched as Desmond got out of the car. He was wearing a suit, but his tie was crooked. He looked like a man who had not slept. He marched up to the keypad and punched in a code. Nothing happened. He punched it in again, harder this time. Still nothing. Mr. Vance had changed the codes at midnight. Desmond kicked the gate. I saw his mouth moving in a shout, but the camera had no audio. He turned around and waved his arms at the white van. 2 men in blue jumpsuits got out of the van. They looked confused. They were carrying heavy toolboxes and a large yellow crowbar. I watched as Camille stepped out of the passenger seat. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf, trying to look like a celebrity, avoiding the paparazzi. But it was Bianca who caught my attention. She hopped out of Darius's car with her phone raised high. She was live streaming. She was broadcasting this invasion to the world. "They are here," I said. Mr. Vance stood up. He buttoned his vest. "Shall we go greet them?" he asked. We walked through the foyer. The house was silent and cool, but outside the heat was rising. We climbed the grand staircase to the second floor. We walked down the hallway to the master suite, which opened onto the main balcony directly above the front entrance. I could hear them now. The sound of my father's voice drifted up through the open windows. "Open this gate," he was screaming. "I am the owner of this property. I have lost my keys. Break it down." I stepped up to the double doors of the balcony. I took a deep breath. I could smell the jasmine from the garden. I could smell the coffee in my cup. And I could smell the victory. I pushed the doors open. I stepped out into the morning sun. Below me, the scene was chaotic. Desmond was screaming at the locksmith. The locksmith was holding the crowbar, looking hesitant. He was looking at the high-end security cameras and shaking his head. Camille was pacing back and forth, clutching her pearls. Darius was leaning against his car, looking bored and anxious. Bianca was narrating to her phone. "So guys, we are here at my husband's family estate," Bianca was saying to her camera. "My mentally ill sister-in-law has locked herself inside. We are just trying to get in to make sure she doesn't hurt herself or steal anything. It is so sad when family goes crazy." I took a sip of my coffee. The ceramic cup clinked softly against my teeth. "I think you should stop," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the morning quiet of the Buckhead estate, it carried like a bell. They all looked up. The shock on their faces was almost comical. They expected to see a scared girl peeking through the curtains. They expected to see me crying. They did not expect to see me standing on the master balcony, wrapped in royal blue silk, drinking Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee, and looking down at them like they were ants at a picnic. Desmond's mouth fell open. His face went from red to a sickly gray. "Zara," he sputtered, "what are you doing up there? Get down here. Open this gate immediately." I rested my elbows on the stone railing. I looked at the locksmith. "Sir," I said to the man with the crowbar, "I would advise you to put that tool down. unless you want to be an accessory to a felony." The locksmith looked at me. He looked at the massive house. He looked at my calm demeanor. Then he looked at my sweating, screaming father. "Boss," the locksmith said to Desmond, "you said nobody was home. You said you lost your keys. She looks pretty at home to me." "Do not listen to her," Desmond roared. He pointed a shaking finger up at me. "She is trespassing. She is my daughter, and she is mentally unstable. She broke in last night. I am hiring you to open my gate. Do your job or I will sue you." "That is right," Bianca shrieked. She pointed her phone up at me. "Smile for the camera, Zara. Everyone is watching you have a breakdown. You are going to jail. You are going to a psych ward." I looked at Bianca. I looked right into the lens of her camera. "Good morning, Internet," I said. "Make sure you record this next part clearly." Mr. Vance stepped out onto the balcony. He moved with the gravity of a mountain. He stood beside me. He placed his leather briefcase on the railing. He did not look at my family. He looked at the locksmiths. "Good morning, gentlemen," Mr. Vance said. His voice was deep and resonated with absolute authority. Desmond froze. "Howard," he whispered. Mr. Vance adjusted his glasses. "I am Augustus Vance, senior partner at Vance and Jameson. I am the attorney of record for the estate of Langston Sterling." He opened the briefcase and pulled out the blue-bound document. He held it up. The gold seal of the state of Georgia caught the sunlight. "This is a warranty deed," Mr. Vance announced. "It certifies that the sole legal owner of this property is Ms. Zara Sterling. It was signed 6 months ago. It is recorded with the county clerk." He looked down at Desmond with eyes that could cut glass. "This property does not belong to the trust, David. It belongs to her, which means you are currently attempting to break and enter into a private residence." The silence that followed was absolute. The birds stopped singing. The wind stopped blowing. Desmond looked like he had been punched in the gut. He staggered back a step. "No," he croaked. "That is a lie. That is a forgery. The old man would never give it to her. She is a girl. She is the owner," Mr. Vance corrected. "And you are a trespasser." The locksmith dropped the crowbar. Clang. The sound of metal hitting pavement echoed loudly. "I am out," the locksmith said. He threw his hands up. "I am not getting involved in this." "You said you were the owner. This is fraud, buddy." He turned and walked rapidly back to his van. His partner followed him, practically running. They jumped in the van and reversed down the driveway, tires screeching as they fled the scene. Desmond stood alone. His army had deserted him. Camille gasped. She pulled her sunglasses down. "Howard, you cannot be serious," she cried. "Look at her. She is in a bathrobe. She cannot run this estate. We are her parents. You are her abusers," Mr. Vance said coldly, "and you are no longer welcome here." Just as the white van disappeared around the corner, blue lights flashed at the end of the street. 2 police cruisers pulled up silently behind Desmond's Mercedes, blocking him in. Mr. Vance had called them 10 minutes ago. The officers got out. They did not draw their weapons, but they had their hands on their belts. "Is there a problem here?" Mr. Vance called down. "Officer." The tall one yelled back. "We got a call about an attempted break-in." My father looked at the police. He looked at the closed gate. He looked up at me. For the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. He was not the giant who had ripped up my test paper. He was not the monster who had thrown my clothes on the lawn. He was a small, desperate man in an ill-fitting suit standing on the wrong side of the gate. He was powerless. The fear that had lived in my marrow for 32 years evaporated, leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. I felt lighter. I felt taller. "Officers," I said, my voice steady. "These people were just leaving. They made a mistake. They thought they owned this house." I paused and took a sip of coffee. They were wrong. Desmond looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. His face was purple. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to scream. He wanted to hit me. But he couldn't. He was trapped between the law behind him and the truth above him. "You think you have won, Zara," he hissed. His voice was low, but I heard every syllable. "You think this is over. You are nothing without us. You will come crawling back when the money runs out." I leaned over the railing. I looked him dead in the eye. "I am not coming back, Father," I said, "and neither are you." Bianca had stopped recording. Her mouth hung open. Darius looked like he was about to vomit. The police officer stepped forward. "Sir, I need you to move your vehicle. You are blocking the roadway. And if you do not have the owner's permission to be here, I suggest you move along." Desmond let out a strangled sound of frustration. It was the sound of a cornered animal. He turned and stormed back to his car. Camille scrambled after him, tripping on her high heels. Darius and Bianca ran to their sports car. They peeled out of the driveway, driving over the manicured grass in their haste to escape the humiliation. The police cruisers followed them out, escorting them away like common criminals. I stood on the balcony and watched them go. I watched until the last speck of dust settled on the driveway. The silence returned to the estate. But it was not empty. It was victorious. Mr. Vance closed his briefcase. "That was round one," he said. I turned to him. I felt a fire burning in my chest. It was the fire Grandma Ruby had prayed for. "They are running away," I said. "But they are not running far. They are going back to the office to figure out how to pay that loan." I walked back into the bedroom. I untied the silk robe and let it fall to the floor. "I am done wearing Grandma's clothes," I said. "I am done standing on balconies." I went to the closet and pulled out a sharp, tailored black suit. "Where are you going?" Mr. Vance asked. "I am going to finish it," I said. "I am going to take the sword to them." The heavy oak doors of the library clicked shut, sealing us inside the quiet heart of the estate. The adrenaline from the balcony confrontation was beginning to fade, and in its place a cold and clinical focus took over. I walked to the desk where the black ledger lay open like a dissected corpse. Mr. Vance stood beside me. He did not look like a lawyer anymore. He looked like a surgeon preparing to remove a malignant tumor. "We need to go deeper, Zara," he said. "We know about the loans, we know about the gambling, but your grandfather was a thorough man. He would not have hidden this book in a safe unless it contained something that could destroy them completely." I sat down in the leather chair. I turned past the pages detailing Darius's gambling debts. I turned past the forged loan documents. I reached the section at the very back of the book. It was labeled simply "Liquidation Strategy." My stomach turned. This was not a record of what they had already stolen. This was a blueprint of what they planned to steal the moment my grandparents took their last breath. It was a list. It was a shopping list for the destruction of our legacy. Item 1, the Buckhead Estate. Estimated quick sale value $8 million. Buyer listed as a shell company known for tearing down historic black homes to build soulless modern condos. Item 2, the art collection. I stopped. My finger hovered over the line. There were sub-entries. Jacob Lawrence Original. Estimated market value $1.2 million. Proposed sale price to private buyer $300,000. Augusta Savage sketch. Estimated value priceless. Proposed sale price $50,000. I looked at the name of the buyer next to the art. It was not a museum. It was not a gallery. It was a name I recognized from my art history classes for all the wrong reasons. Julian Thorne. He was a private collector known for buying stolen or dubious artifacts. He was a man who locked culture away in basements where no one could see it. They were going to sell the soul of this family for pennies on the dollar. I looked up at Mr. Vance. My vision was blurry, not with tears, but with a red-hot rage. They were not just going to sell the house, I said, my voice shaking. They were going to strip it. They were going to sell the history. They were going to sell the Bible. They were going to sell the paintings that Grandpa spent 40 years protecting. And they were going to sell them to a man who would hide them away forever just to get quick cash for their debts. Mr. Vance nodded grimly. "It is the behavior of a parasite, Zara." The word hung in the air. Parasite. For years I had thought of my family as merely toxic or difficult. I thought they were just bad with money. But looking at this ledger, I realized the truth was far more sinister. They were organisms that could not create life on their own. They could only feed on a host. My grandfather had built a business. My grandmother had built a home. I had built a life of service. But Desmond and Darius had built nothing. They had never created a single dollar of value in their lives. They simply attached themselves themselves to the strongest vessel and drained it until it was dry. And now that the grandparents were gone, they were trying to attach themselves to me. They wanted me to sign that power of attorney so they could latch onto my veins and begin the feeding cycle all over again. They are not family, I whispered. They are ticks. I looked at the ledger again. If I had signed that paper yesterday, I said, if I had given in to the guilt and the pressure, by next week the art would be gone, the house would be sold, and I would be on the street wondering where the money went. Mr. Vance pointed to the bottom of the page. There is one more thing, he said. I looked. Stapled to the back cover was a printed email. It was from my father to a life insurance broker. It was dated 3 weeks ago. Subject policy payout timeline. Body. My father is in the final stages. We expect the event to happen within the month. Please confirm that the $2 million policy payout can be expedited. I have pressing obligations that need to be settled immediately upon his passing. I felt bile rise in my throat. He was betting on their death. He was not praying for their recovery. He was emailing brokers asking how fast he could get the check when their heart stopped beating. He was timing it, I said. He took out the fraudulent loan knowing that the insurance money would cover it. He just needed them to die on schedule. It was monstrous. It was the calculation of a sociopath. I closed the ledger. The sound was loud in the quiet room. That is enough, I said. I have seen enough. Not yet, Mr. Vance said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver USB drive we had found in the safe. Your grandfather gave you the number Zara, but your grandmother wanted you to hear the heart. He walked over to the desktop computer on the desk. He plugged the drive in. A folder popped up on the screen. It contained a single audio file. It was dated exactly 2 weeks before the accident. I remember that day. It was a Sunday. My grandparents had gone to the hospital for a checkup. I had stayed home to clean the kitchen. My father and Darius had come over. They said they needed to use the library to discuss business. I had brought them coffee and then left them alone. I did not know that Grandma Ruby had installed a voice-activated recorder in the ventilation shaft. Mr. Vance clicked play. The speakers crackled. Then my father's voice filled the room. It was loud and arrogant. I am telling you, Darius, stop worrying. The old man is weaker every day. Did you see how his hands shook at breakfast? He can barely hold a fork. Then Darius's voice, whiny, petulant. But the bank called again. Dad, they said the audit is scheduled for the 15th. If we do not pay the $2 million back by then, they are going to look at the collateral. They are going to check the signatures. Desmond's voice again. Harder this time. They won't check anything if the account is paid. We just need him to hold on for a few more days or die a few days sooner. It doesn't matter. Once he is gone, I am the executor. I control the flow. I will wire the money from the estate trust to the business account the morning after the funeral. There was a pause. I heard the clink of a glass on the desk. What about Zara? Darius asked. She is always hovering around them. She sees things. My father laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound that made my skin crawl. Zara, he scoffed. Zara is a non-factor. She is a frightened little mouse. I trained her well. She jumps when I snap my fingers. She is too stupid to understand what she is seeing. I gripped the arms of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. She is not that stupid, Darius said. She asked me about the cash box once. She is a girl, Desmond said dismissively, and she is a scapegoat. That is her role. She exists to carry the burden so we do not have to. When the old man dies, we will kick her out. We cannot have her living here asking questions. Kick her out, Darius asked. Where will she go? Who cares? Desmond replied. She has an art degree. Let her go paint on the sidewalk. We will tell the family she was stealing. Camille has already started planting the seeds with the church ladies. We will say Zara is unstable. We will say she is on drugs if we have to. No one will believe her over me. I am Desmond Sterling. The recording continued. We will give her a few $1,000s maybe to sign a non-disclosure agreement. If she refuses, we throw her on the street. She will break. She always breaks. She is weak. The recording ended. The silence in the library was heavier than lead. I sat there frozen. A coldness started in my toes and spread up through my legs into my chest. It was a different kind of cold than I had ever felt before. It was not fear. It was the death of love. For 32 years, I had held on to a tiny sliver of hope, the hope that maybe deep down beneath the abuse and the neglect, my father loved me. I thought maybe he was just hard on me because he wanted me to be tough. I thought maybe he was just stressed. But the voice on that recording was not stressed. It was calculated. It was relaxed. He had planned my destruction over a cup of coffee in my grandfather's library. He had called me a mouse. He said he had trained me, like a dog. I looked at Mr. Vance. His face was pale. He looked furious. "I am sorry you had to hear that, Zara," he said softly. "I am not," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady. It was completely devoid of emotion. I needed to hear it. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the manicured lawn where I had been thrown the night before. "I see it now," I said. "It is not a family. It is a cancer." Mr. Vance nodded. "And what do you do with cancer?" he asked. "You do not negotiate with it," I said, turning back to him. "You do not ask it to be nice. You do not give it a second chance." I walked back to the desk and pulled the USB drive out of the computer. I held it in my hand. It felt light, but I knew it had the weight to crush them. "You cut it out," I said. "You cut it out completely so the body can survive." I looked at the clock. It was 11 in the morning. "Mr. Vance," I said, "do you have the number for my father's office?" "I do," he said. "Call him. Tell him I am ready to surrender." Mr. Vance looked at me with a question in his eyes. "Surrender?" he asked. "Tell him I am broken," I said. "Tell him the pressure is too much. Tell him I want to meet him at his office to sign the papers. Tell him I am bringing the deed." Mr. Vance smiled slowly. He understood. "You want to lure them in," he said. "I want to go to them," I corrected. "I want to walk into his territory. I want him to feel safe. I want him to feel powerful. I want him to sit in his big chair and gloat." I clenched my fist around the USB drive. "And then I want to watch the light go out of his eyes when he realizes that the mouse has brought a trap." Mr. Vance picked up the phone. "I will make the call," he said. While he dialed, I turned and walked out of the library. I went upstairs to the master suite. I walked into the massive walk-in closet that had belonged to Grandma Ruby. I ran my hand along the rows of clothes. My grandmother had been a woman of style, but also a woman of substance. She did not wear trendy clothes like my mother. She wore armor. I found it at the back of the closet. It was a vintage Chanel suit in a deep charcoal gray. It was structured and severe. It was the suit she had worn when she marched in the protests in the 60s. It was the suit she had worn when she sat on the board of the college. I took off the blue silk robe. I put on the white silk blouse. I buttoned it up to my chin. I stepped into the wool skirt. It fit perfectly. I slipped my arms into the jacket. The shoulders were padded and sharp. I looked in the mirror. I did not look like the girl in the trash bag dress anymore. I did not look like the girl in the bathrobe. I looked like a sterling. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I put on a layer of red lipstick. The color was called Victory Red. It was the same shade Grandma Ruby always wore. I picked up the new leather briefcase Mr. Vance had bought for me. I placed the black ledger inside. I placed the USB drive inside, and then I added one more thing, a small portable Bluetooth speaker. I snapped the briefcase shut. The sound was final. I walked back downstairs. Mr. Gang. Vance was waiting for me in the foyer. He looked up and his eyes widened. "Desmond is expecting us," he said. He sounded very pleased with himself. "He thinks you are coming to beg for forgiveness." I adjusted my cuffs. "Let us not keep him waiting," I said. We walked out the front door. The Bentley was waiting. The driver opened the door. As I slid into the back seat, I looked up at the balcony where I had stood earlier. That had been a defense. That had been about protecting the fortress. Now we were going on the offense. The car pulled away from the house. We drove through the iron gates. We passed the spot where the locksmith had dropped his crowbar. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not fear. It was not sadness. It was a roar. It started low and deep in my belly, a vibration of power. Grandma Ruby had written that she wanted me to roar. She wanted me to stop shielding and start fighting. I looked out the window as the trees of Buckhead whizzed by. I am coming for you, Father, I thought, and this time I am not the one who is going to break. The Bentley glided to a silent stop in front of the Sterling Consulting office. The location was a stark and depressing contrast to the majestic estate we had just left. My father's business empire was not housed in a glass skyscraper like Mr. Vance's firm. It was tucked away in a dilapidated strip mall in Sandy Springs, squeezed tightly between a discount dry cleaner that smelled of chemicals and a pizza parlor that looked like it had not passed a health inspection in a decade. I looked out the tinted window at the peeling paint on the storefront. The sign above the door said Sterling Consulting in gold letters, but the S was crooked and the gold was flaking off to reveal cheap gray plastic underneath. It was the perfect metaphor for my father. It was a shiny veneer pasted over a rotting foundation. "Are you ready, Zara?" Mr. Vance asked. I looked down at my grandmother's charcoal suit. I touched the smooth leather of the briefcase that held the evidence of their crimes. "I have never been more ready," I said. The driver opened the door. I stepped out onto the cracked pavement. The heat of the afternoon rose up from the asphalt. I walked to the glass door. I did not hesitate. I pushed it open, and the little brass bell above it jingled with a pathetic, tinny sound. The air inside hit me like a physical blow. It was stale and recycled. It smelled of old coffee and industrial carpet cleaner mixed with the faint, damp scent of mold. It was the smell of failure. The reception area was empty. My father had fired his secretary 3 months ago to save money, though he told everyone she had retired to spend time with her grandchildren. I walked past the empty desk and straight into the main office. They were waiting for me. They had arranged themselves like a royal court in exile. My father Desmond sat behind his massive desk. It was made of particle board covered in a laminate that was trying very hard to look like mahogany. He was leaning back in his creaking leather chair with his hands steeped together. He was trying to project power. He was trying to look like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company instead of a man who was 9 days away from federal prison. My mother Camille sat in a visitor chair against the wall. She had removed her sunglasses. She was buffing her nails with an emery board radiating an air of smug boredom. She looked up as I entered, and a slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a cat that sees the mouse return to the trap. On the cheap vinyl sofa in the corner sat my brother Darius and his wife Bianca. They were huddled close together, whispering. When they saw me, they straightened up. The fear I had seen on their faces at the balcony was gone. It had been replaced by arrogance. They had convinced themselves that my show of force in the morning was just a tantrum. They believed I was here because I was scared. They believed I was here to surrender. Mr. Vance stepped in behind me and closed the door. He stood silently by the frame, a dark shadow in the corner. "Well, well," Desmond said. His voice boomed in the small room. He spread his hands wide. "Look who finally came to her senses." He stood up and walked around the desk. He stopped a few feet away from me, looking me up and down. He sneered at my grandmother's suit. "Took you long enough, Zara," he said. "Did you enjoy playing Queen of the Castle for one night? It is a big, lonely house, isn't it? It is too much house for a little girl with no friends and no skills." I said nothing. I just looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the way his hands trembled slightly, even as he tried to look confident. "We were worried about you, sweetie," Camille chimed in. She stood up and walked toward me. Her voice was dripping with a thick, syrupy sweetness that made my stomach turn. It was the same voice she used when she wanted a discount at the department store. It was the voice of manipulation. "We really were," Camille continued, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I stepped back sharply. She paused, her hand hovering in the air. She lowered it with a sigh. "You were clearly having a breakdown this morning, Zara," she said. "All that shouting, the police, it was very dramatic. But we forgive you. We know you are not yourself. The grief has made you unstable." She looked at Desmond and nodded. "See, David, I told you she would come back. She knows she needs her family. She knows she cannot survive in the real world without us." Desmond chuckled. He sat back down on the edge of his desk, crossing his ankles. "I'm glad you are finally ready to be reasonable, Zara," he said. "That stunt this morning was cute. It was very theatrical. But let us be honest. You proved your little point. You got your attention. Now it is time for the adults to step in and handle the real money. It is time to handle the real business." He leaned forward, his face twisting into a mask of counterfeit generosity. "So here is what is going to happen. I am going to give you one last chance because I am a benevolent father. We will call it a family reconciliation fee." He picked up a stack of papers from his desk and waved them in the air. "You sign the asset management papers right now. You transfer the $45 million into the family trust. I will of course manage it correctly because I am the financial expert in this family." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the words hang in the stale air. "And as a sign of my good faith, we will let you keep $10 million all to yourself. Free and clear. You can keep the house too. You can live there and play curator with your little art books." $10 million, Bianca whispered from the sofa. Her eyes went wide with greedy excitement. She nudged Darius. "Wow, he is being so nice to her. That is so much money." Desmond smiled at her reaction. He felt generous. He felt like a king dispensing crumbs to the peasants. "It is a very good deal, Zara," he said, turning his gaze back to me. "Frankly, it is more than you deserve after the humiliation you put us through this morning with the police. But we are family, and family takes care of each other." I looked at the papers in his hand. I looked at his smug, expecting face. He truly believed this. He truly believed that I was so broken and so dependent that I would gratefully accept a fraction of my own inheritance just to be allowed back into his toxic orbit. He thought he was negotiating with a child. I tightened my grip on the handle of my briefcase. "Is that your final offer, Father?" I asked. My voice was calm. It did not shake. Desmond laughed. "It is my only offer," he said. "Now come here and sign. Let us get this over with so we can go to dinner. I am starving." I walked forward. My heels clicked on the cheap, warped laminate floor. Click, click, click. I did not go to the papers. I walked to the desk. I looked him dead in the eye. I lifted the heavy leather briefcase and placed it on the desk. I did not open it immediately. I let them look at it. It was a beautiful briefcase. It looked out of place in this room of cheap furniture and cheaper lies. "What is this?" Desmond asked, his smile faltering slightly. "Is this your counteroffer? Are you trying to negotiate, Zara?" "I told you I am not playing games. I am not negotiating," I said. I clicked the latches open. Snap, snap. I reached inside. I did not pull out a contract. I pulled out the heavy black accountant's ledger. I placed it on the desk. It landed with a solid, heavy, definitive thud. The sound was too loud in the quiet office. It sounded like a judge's gavel. Desmond stared at the black book. He blinked. He did not recognize it yet. "What is this?" Camille scoffed from behind me. "Your diary? More of your childish art projects." I reached back into the briefcase. I pulled out the small black USB flash drive. I placed it right next to the ledger. Click. Then I reached in one last time. I pulled out the sleek, black portable speaker. I set it down in the center of the desk, forming a perfect triangle of evidence. Desmond looked at the objects. He looked confused. He looked annoyed. But Darius did not look annoyed. I heard a sharp intake of breath from the sofa. I looked over. Darius was staring at the black ledger. His face had gone rigid. His eyes were locked on the spine of the book. He knew that book. He had seen Grandpa Langston writing in it in the library. He had seen it the day he begged for money to cover his poker debts. The color drained from Darius's face. The arrogant smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a sick, pale, clammy terror. He started to hyperventilate. where he stammered. His voice was suddenly a high-pitched squeak. "Where did you get that?" "What?" Desmond snapped, looking at his son. "What is it, Darius?" "It is just some old book." I looked at my brother. "He recognizes it," I said. My voice was cold and clear, cutting through the stale air like a scalpel. "Do you not?" Darius shook his head violently. No, you recognize Grandpa's real accounting," I said, "because you were there when he wrote in it. You were there right after you came begging for $50,000 to pay off your bookie. Were you not?" Desmond froze. He looked from me to Darius and then down at the book. The smug smile finally fell from his face. I plugged the USB drive into the speaker. A small blue light blinked on. I looked at my father. "You wanted to talk about business, Father," I said. "You wanted to handle the real money." I pressed the power button. "So let us check the books." I pressed the play button on the small black speaker. The device let out a soft chime, indicating it was connected. Then the voice of my father filled the small, humid office. It was crystal clear. It was recorded in high-definition audio, thanks to the expensive technology my grandmother had hidden in the ventilation shaft. It was not the voice of the benevolent patriarch he tried to project. It was the voice of a conspirator. "I am telling you, Darius, stop worrying. The old man is weaker every day. Did you see how his hands shook at breakfast? He can barely hold a fork." The reaction in the room was instantaneous. My mother, Camille, froze. Her hand, which had been reaching for her water glass, stopped in midair. Her mouth fell open. She looked at the speaker as if it were a possessed object. Then Darius's voice pealed out of the speaker. It was whiny and pathetic. "But the bank called again, Dad. They said the audit is scheduled for the 15th. If we do not pay the $2 million back by then, they are going to look at the collateral. They are going to check the signatures." Desmond's face turned a color I had never seen before. It was a mix of ash gray and violent purple. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving his skin looking like wet clay. He stared at the speaker. His eyes were bulging. "That is a lie," he whispered. "That is a fake." The recording continued, relentless and unforgiving. "They won't check anything if the account is paid. We just need him to hold on for a few more days or die a few days sooner. It doesn't matter. Once he is gone, I am the executor. I control the flow. I will wire the money from the estate trust to the business account the morning after the funeral." Desmond lunged. He moved with the desperation of a drowning man. He threw himself across the desk, his hands clawing for the speaker. He was going to smash it. He was going to destroy the voice that was confessing his sins to the world. He never made it. Mr. Vance stepped out of the shadows. He moved with a speed that belied his age. He placed his large frame directly between my father and the desk. He did not touch Desmond. He simply stood there like a granite wall. "I would not do that, David," Mr. Vance said. His voice was a low rumble of dangerous calm. Desmond recoiled. He stumbled back, crashing into his filing cabinet. He was breathing in heavy, ragged gasps. He looked wild. He looked trapped. "Turn it off!" he screamed. "Turn it off! It is a deep fake. She manufactured it. That is not me. I did not turn it off. I let it play." "What about Zara?" Darius asked on the recording. "She is a girl," Desmond's voice sneered. "And she is a scapegoat. That is her role. She exists to carry the burden so we do not have to. When the old man dies, we will kick her out. We cannot have her living here asking questions." Camille let out a strangled gasp. She covered her mouth with her hand. She looked at her husband with wide, horrified eyes. She had known they disliked me. She had known they wanted the money. But she had not known this. She had not known they were plotting to discard me like trash before the body was even cold. I finally pressed the stop button. The silence that rushed back into the room was deafening. It was heavy and toxic. I opened the black ledger. I turned the book around so it faced them. "Let us review the documentation," I said. I pointed to the first column. "Marcus Darius Sterling," I read aloud. Darius flinched. He was curled into a ball on the vinyl sofa, his knees pulled up to his chest. He looked like a child waiting for a beating. "Over $500,000 in withdrawals from the estate, petty cash and wire transfers," I said. Bianca sat up straight. Her eyes were darting back and forth between the ledger and her husband. $500,000, she whispered. Her voice was trembling. Darius, you told me you were investing in a tech startup. You said the money was tied up in equity. It was tied up, I said, answering for him. It was tied up at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. It was tied up with 2 offshore bookies in the Cayman Islands. I flipped the page. I pointed to a series of bank routing numbers. These are not investments, Bianca. These are gambling debts. Your husband is not a businessman. He is a gambling addict who has embezzled $500,000 from his grandparents. Bianca made a sound like a wounded animal. She looked at Darius with pure revulsion. You stole it, she screamed. You stole from them. Darius began to sob. It was a pathetic, ugly sound. I had to baby, he cried. They were going to break my legs. I had to pay them. I turned the page again. I looked at my father. And then there is you, father, I said. Desmond was leaning against the filing cabinet. He was holding his chest as if he were having a heart attack. But I knew he wasn't. He was just realizing that his life was over. $2 million, I said. A business loan from SunTrust Bank. A loan that this failing company could never qualify for on its own. I tapped the page where the forged signature was taped. You forged Grandpa Langston's signature, I said. You pledged his private stock portfolio as collateral without his permission. That is not business, father. That is bank fraud. That is aggravated identity theft. That is a federal crime. I closed the book with a snap. Your generous offer of $10 million was not generous, I said. It was desperate. You were not trying to reconcile with me. You were trying to use my inheritance to pay back your illegal loan before the bank audits you in 9 days. I looked at the watch on my wrist. 9 days, father. You were going to steal from me to cover up the fact that you stole from him. You were going to frame me as incompetent so you could wash your hands of the crime. The truth hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, no one moved. Then the realization hit Bianca. It hit her hard. She stood up. Her legs were shaking, but her face was a mask of reptilian fury. She looked around the cheap office. She looked at the peeling paint. She looked at the fake mahogany desk, and she finally saw it for what it was. There is no money, she whispered. She looked at Darius. You are broke. Darius looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. Baby, please, we can fix this. Dad has a plan. He has no plan, Bianca shrieked. Her voice cracked into a piercing scream that shook the walls. He is going to prison. You are both going to prison. She backed away from him as if he were contagious. She grabbed her expensive handbag from the sofa, clutching it like a shield. You told me you were rich, she yelled. You told me you were the heir. You told me this family was royalty. You are nothing but common thieves. Bianca. Calm down, Desmond said, trying to regain control. He stepped toward her. We can still work this out. Zara is reasonable. Do not touch me, Bianca screamed. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide with panic. She saw the ledger. She saw the lawyer. She saw the end of the road. I am not going to jail for you, she spat at Darius. I am not going to raise my child while you are rotting in a federal cell. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped it. I am calling my lawyer, she said. I am filing for divorce, and I am filing for full custody. Do not try to come home, Darius. I will have the locks changed by tonight. She turned and ran. She did not walk. She ran out of the office. Her heels clacked frantically down the hallway. The bell above the door jingled violently as she slammed it open and fled into the parking lot. The sound of her car engine roaring to life and speeding away was the only sound in the world. Darius watched her go. His face crumpled. He slid off the sofa and collapsed onto the dirty industrial carpet. He buried his face in his hands and wailed. It was the sound of a man who had lost everything in the span of 5 minutes. I stood by the desk. I looked at my father. He was not looking at me. He was staring at the door where Bianca had just exited. He looked old. He looked small. The arrogant CEO was gone. All that remained was a frightened criminal standing in a room that smelled of failure. I picked up the black ledger. You are not looking at a negotiation, father, I said. I turned to Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance opened his briefcase. He pulled out a new stack of documents. They were thick and bound with heavy staples. You are looking at a surrender. The sound of the door slamming shut behind Bianca echoed in the small office like a gunshot. The silence that followed was broken only by the ragged weeping of my brother Darius. He was curled on the dirty carpet in his expensive suit, clutching his knees to his chest. He looked like a broken child. He looked like the 12-year-old boy whose test scores had been protected at the cost of my dignity. But there was no one to protect him now. His wife had left him. His money was gone. His future was a black hole. My mother Camille looked at her golden son sobbing on the floor. She looked at the empty doorway where her socialite daughter-in-law had fled. The facade of the perfect Sterling family had not just cracked. It had shattered into a million irreparable pieces. She turned to me. Her face was pale and streaked with tears, but her eyes held a desperate, calculating glimmer. She knew she had lost control. She knew intimidation would no longer work. So she reached for the only weapon she had left. Guilt. "Zara, baby, please," she wailed. Her voice was wet and trembling. She rushed toward me with her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "You cannot do this to us. We are your flesh and blood. Look at your brother. He is suffering. Look at your father. He is an old man. They made mistakes, yes, but they love you. You cannot destroy your own family. Think of the scandal. Think of the church. Think of the honor of the Sterling name." I stood my ground. I did not flinch. I watched her approach with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. "Honor," I repeated. My voice was as hard as granite. I took a step back, moving out of her reach. "This family has no honor, Mother. You killed it. You killed it when you let Father tear up my acceptance letter. You killed it when you let Darius steal from me. You killed it when you plotted to throw me on the street before Grandpa was even dead." Camille froze. Her hands dropped to her sides. "You chose greed," I said. "You chose lies. You chose appearance over substance. And yesterday you chose to discard me." I looked at Desmond, who was still leaning against the filing cabinet. He was breathing hard, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped rat. "This is not me destroying the family," I said. "This is the family finally facing the destruction it created." Desmond pushed himself off the cabinet. The shock was fading and the rage was returning. He was a narcissist, and narcissists do not accept defeat. They attack. "You ungrateful little witch," he roared. He lunged at me. His hands were hooked into claws, reaching for my throat. He wanted to silence me. He wanted to crush the mirror that was showing him his true face. "I will kill you," he screamed. "Give me that book." He covered the distance in 2 strides, but he never reached me. Mr. Vance moved with a fluidity that was terrifying. He stepped forward and caught my father's wrist in midair. He did not strike him. He simply applied pressure. He twisted Desmond's arm behind his back and forced him down onto the desk. "Sit down, David," Mr. Vance commanded. His voice was a low growl that vibrated in the small room. He shoved my father back into his creaking leather chair. Desmond collapsed into the seat, rubbing his wrist. He looked up at Mr. Vance with pure fear. He looked at me with pure hatred, but he stayed seated. Mr. Vance straightened his tie. He stood beside me, a silent sentinel. I looked at my father. He was defeated. He was humiliated. He was terrified. I turned to Mr. Vance. "You were right, Mr. Vance," I said clearly. "Calling the district attorney is the correct legal move. These men are criminals. They belong in a cell." Desmond flinched. Darius let out a fresh wail of despair. However, I continued, "I am not my father. I am not my mother. I will not be needlessly cruel." I let the words hang in the stale air. I saw a flicker of hope spark in Desmond's dead eyes. It was pathetic. "I will not be the one to send you to prison today," I said. I walked to the desk. Mr. Vance opened his briefcase and placed a new thick stack of documents on top of the black ledger. "I am going to give you a choice, Father." Desmond looked at the papers. He looked at me. "What kind of choice?" he rasped. "It is not a negotiation," I said. "It is an ultimatum." I placed my hand on the stack of documents. "Option A is simple," I said. I pick up my ledger. I pick up my USB drive. Mr. Vance and I walk out that door. Within the hour, a full unredacted copy of this evidence will be on the desk of the district attorney, the IRS, and the FBI. I leaned in close. You, father, will be arrested for bank fraud and aggravated identity theft. You will go to federal prison for a minimum of 10 to 15 years. You, Darius, will be arrested for embezzlement and grand larceny. You will go to state prison for 5 to 7 years. You will both lose everything, and I will sleep very well tonight." The room was silent. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like a roar. Or I said, "Option B." I tapped the papers. "You sign these. Right here. Right now. No lawyers. No reading period. No negotiations." "What are they?" Desmond whispered. "It is your unconditional surrender," I said. I flipped the document open to the first tab. Condition 1. You, Desmond Sterling, will immediately sign over your resignation as CEO of Sterling Consulting. You will transfer full ownership of this company, its assets, and all its debts, including the $2 million fraudulent loan, to me. Desmond gasped. "My company, that is my life. Your life is a fraud," I snapped. "I will liquidate this company. I will sell the furniture. I will sell the client list. I will strip it down to the copper wiring to pay back the bank. You will walk away with nothing, but you will walk away a free man." I turned to the next tab. Condition 2. I looked at Darius. He was wiping his nose on his sleeve, looking up at me with bloodshot eyes. "You, Darius, will sign papers agreeing to enter a 90-day inpatient gambling addiction treatment facility. We have a car waiting to take you there immediately." Darius nodded frantically. Yes, okay, I will go. "And after you get out," I said, my voice hardening, "you will get a job, a real job. Mr. Vance has a contact at a construction firm. You will work with your hands. You will learn what it means to earn $1. You will never see a dime of my money again. If you relapse, if you gamble, if you call me for money, I will send the ledger to the police." I turned back to the main document. And condition 3. I looked at all of them. I looked at Camille, who was shrinking against the wall. "You will all sign a legally binding document drafted by Mr. Vance renouncing any and all current or future claims to the estate of Langston and Ruby Sterling. You will renounce any claim to the $45 million. You will renounce any claim to the Buckhead house." I paused. "And you will legally agree to a lifetime restraining order. You will never contact me again. You will not call me. You will not text me. You will not post about me on social media. If you do, the deal is void and I go to the FBI." Camille let out a choked sob. "You would leave us with nothing," she cried. "You would leave us destitute. We will lose our house." "You will lose your house," I agreed. "Without the company income, you cannot pay the mortgage. You will have to sell it. You will have to downsize. You will have to live within your means for the first time in your lives." I looked at her. "You wanted me to be independent mother. Now you will learn to be independent too." I pulled a heavy fountain pen from my pocket. I uncapped it. I placed it on the document. "Take it or leave it," I said. "You have 1 minute to decide." I looked at my watch. 59 seconds. Desmond looked at the pen. He looked at his sobbing son. He looked at his terrified wife. He looked at the black ledger that held the power to put him in a cage for the rest of his life. He was beaten. The fight drained out of him, leaving him a hollow shell. He reached out. His hand shook violently. He picked up the pen. He signed. He signed his resignation. He signed the confession. He signed the release. He pushed the papers to Darius. Darius crawled to the desk. He did not even read them. He just signed his name over and over again, weeping onto the pages. Then they pushed the papers to Camille. She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were pleading. She wanted me to save her. She wanted me to be the scapegoat one last time. I stared back at her with a face of stone. She signed. Mr. Vance stepped forward. He collected the documents. He checked every signature. He nodded to me. "It is done," he said. He placed the papers in his briefcase. He snapped the latches shut. I picked up the black ledger. I picked up the speaker. I picked up the USB drive. I turned to the door. "Zara, wait," Camille whispered. I stopped. My hand was on the doorknob. I did not turn around. "We are family," she said. Her voice was faint. "We were never family," I said. "We were a transaction, and the account is closed." I opened the door. The bell jingled. I walked out into the bright, hot afternoon sun. I heard the door close behind me. I heard the lock click. I walked to the Bentley. The driver opened the door. I slid inside. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the pathetic strip mall one last time. I saw my father's silhouette in the window. He was just a shadow now. I felt a sensation in my chest. It was a deep, expanding warmth. It was relief. The chain was broken. The curse was lifted. I leaned my head back against the leather seat, and for the first time in 32 years, I closed my eyes and felt completely and utterly free. It has been exactly 365 days since I walked out of that humid office in Sandy Springs and left my family sitting in the wreckage of their own greed. I stood on the wide stone patio of the Buckhead estate, holding a glass of sparkling cider. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. But the silence that used to haunt this massive house was gone. It had been replaced by the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The sound of life. The heavy iron gates were wide open. The driveway was lined with cars. But they were not the luxury vehicles of my father's superficial friends. They were the sensible sedans and minivans of parents from all over Atlanta. I looked up at the new brass plaque that gleamed above the massive front doors. The Langston and Ruby Sterling Center for Heritage and Arts. I had kept my promise. I had kept the $45 million, but I had not used it to buy yachts or islands. I had used it to turn my fortress into a sanctuary. I walked through the crowd. I saw a group of 10-year-old boys sitting on the grass in a circle. A teacher was showing them the Jacob Lawrence painting that my father had planned to sell for pennies. The boys were staring at it with wide eyes, seeing their own history reflected in the bold colors and jagged lines. Inside the house, the library where I had found the black ledger was now a reading room. A teenage girl with braids was sitting in my grandfather's leather chair, reading a book about entrepreneurship. She looked comfortable. She looked like she belonged there. She did not know that for 30 years a girl named Zara had been afraid to even breathe in that room. Mr. Vance walked up to me. He was wearing a tuxedo and holding a plate of hors d'oeuvres. He looked younger than he had a year ago. The weight of carrying my grandfather's secrets had been lifted from his shoulders. "It is a good turnout, Zara," he said, smiling. "It is perfect," I replied. He took a sip of his drink and looked at me with a serious expression. "I received the monthly report from the caseworker today," he said, "regarding Darius." I stiffened slightly. Even after a year, the name caused a phantom ache in my chest. "How is he?" I asked. "He is clean," Mr. Vance said. "He completed his 90 days in rehab without a single infraction. He is working the night shift at a gas station in Decatur. It is minimum wage. It is hard work. But he is doing it. He has rented a small studio apartment. He pays his own bills." I nodded. A small knot of tension in my stomach loosened. "He is finally becoming a man," I said. "It took losing everything for him to find himself." "And the others?" Mr. Vance asked gently. I looked toward the gate. I knew where they were. Desmond and Camille were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a nondescript complex on the outskirts of the city. They had lost the big house. They had lost the country club membership. But the worst punishment was not financial. It was social. When I liquidated the consulting firm, the truth about the forged loan came out. I did not have to scream it. I simply let the facts speak. The church elders saw the paperwork. The prayer circle saw the audit. The smear campaign my mother had launched collapsed under the weight of the truth. They were pariahs now. They were alone with each other, trapped in a small space with nothing but their bitterness and their fading memories of a glory they had stolen. "They have not tried to contact me," I said. "They know better," Mr. Vance said. "The restraining order is permanent. And frankly, I think they are too ashamed. You beat them, Zara. You did not just beat them. You outclassed them." I left Mr. Vance and walked up the grand staircase. I ran my hand along the smooth mahogany banister. I walked down the hallway to the master suite. I stepped out onto the balcony. This was the spot. This was where I had stood 1 year ago, wearing a blue silk robe and trembling with a mixture of terror and caffeine. This was where I had looked down at the locksmith and the police and realized that I held the power. I looked down at the lawn now. It was filled with laughter. A jazz quartet was playing softly on the terrace. The air smelled of jasmine and hope. For a long time, I thought the $45 million was the victory. I thought the money was the shield my grandparents had left me. But as I stood there in the twilight, I realized I was wrong. The money was just a tool. It was fuel. It paid the electric bill. It paid the teachers. It bought the paint for the art classes. The real inheritance was the fire. The real inheritance was the moment I decided that I was worth more than my father's approval. It was the moment I realized that no is a complete sentence. It was the moment I stopped being the scapegoat and started being the gatekeeper. I thought about the black ledger locked away in the safe downstairs. It was a book of sins. But this house was no longer a monument to those sins. It was a monument to the future. I thought about Grandma Ruby's prayer journal. I thought about her trembling handwriting asking the Lord to give me strength. "You did not need to worry, Grandma," I whispered to the evening stars. I looked at my hands. They were no longer rough from scrubbing floors. They were strong. They were capable. They were the hands of a woman who had rebuilt a legacy from the ashes of betrayal. I had walked through the fire of my family's greed, and I had not burned. I had been forged. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool night air. I did not feel the need to scream anymore. I did not feel the need to explain myself to anyone. The world below me was loud with music and conversation, but inside me there was a profound quiet. It was the silence of a war that had been won. I smiled. I had roared. And finally, the whole world was listening. Lesson learned. Amani's journey, now Zara teaches us that waiting for an apology from toxic people is a waste of your destiny. Often the people who should protect us are the ones who prey on our silence. True power isn't about revenge. It's about removing their access to your energy and resources. By embracing the painful truth and setting non-negotiable boundaries, you don't just save yourself, you honor the ancestors who prayed for your freedom. You are not the scapegoat. You are the cycle breaker. Your silence kept you safe, but your roar will set you free.